Well, the next album is called Advocate. That one came out in 2000 and probably features your most provocative album cover. And this is a picture of you sporting flesh-colored devil horns, smoking a cigar again, with a look of contentment on your face. It's sort of menacing kind of thing in a way. So I can't wait to hear the explanation for that.
Oh boy. Well, again, it was having fun. I did that photo shoot in Trier, Germany, and I decided on the album title, not the full phrase "Devil's Advocate," but just "Advocate," to advocate something, and then putting on the devil outfit was supposed to make it complete in a way. But it was done in a warehouse, a costume shop warehouse where they had all this stuff, and the record company guy said, "Yeah, let's do this. That would this will be fun." And again, it's a strong look.
It is, but usually Satan has red skin or they're like goat horns or something. This is like human flesh-colored horns. It makes it a little more realistic and believable. You can tell it's kind of like a bald cap kind of thing.
Right.
It's not like a prosthetic, or it's not even trying to be believable. It's like you said, it's having fun. Because I knew I was going to talk about that cover, I figured we'll talk about all the covers.
Right, exactly.
But the point is the music within. So Devil's Advocate, just shortened to Advocate. Again, a lot of great tracks to pick from, but the one I feel compelled to play, just due to its sheer uniqueness, is a bit of sonic insanity called At the Glee Club.
Oh boy.
So what inspired this stream of consciousness musical rant?
Well, that was Pete Davenport. He was part of a group with these guys, Zach Danziger and Tim LaFave. There was things like that on their record, but it was kind of a purposely over the top, outrageous in nature, but lots of great musical things going on as well. And I was inspired to sort of, that was almost my tipping my hat to those guys.
Well, again, this isn't representative of the whole album, but because it is so different, I wanted to spin it. So let's do that.
Okay.
From the Advocate album, this is
At the Glee Club.
A little song?
At the Glee Club.
Sing! Sing!
Hey, you. Soprano. Standing behind the guy in the tuxedo with the green rug on his head. Sing that chord again.
At the Glee Club, we like to sing a little song in tempo, unison, harmony. At the Glee Club, sometimes I like to beat myself with a fish. Kiss my Annie Trish and smash my rear end with a dish. At the Glee Club. Well, tune. Everybody get dressed, get undressed. Get dressed again, get undressed. Sometimes I say yeah, sometimes I don't say yeah, Sometimes I pack a real good punch in the boardroom. At the Glee Club, we sing songs that go. We like to sing your name, Fred? Sometimes I like to put on green socks and, take the kitty to the vet and, sometimes go to Atlantic City and place a bet. And bang myself in the head with a broom. It goes boom, 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 boom. Yeah, and a broom and a pair of, sandals. Sandals are good. So is a barracuda steak. For two. Put some ketchup on that barracuda steak. And serve it with some breakfast tea. It's nice.
At the Greek Club. Singing.
Boom. Boom. Yeah, shut up, don't say yeah,
Shut up, don't say it,
Now it's time to obsess. Hey, I'm having a conversation with myself. I must be insane. Oh, well.
Conversation with yourself.
Stop talking to yourself. What are you, out of your fucking mind? No, but hey, I'm having a conversation with myself. I must be insane. Oh, well.
Conversation with yourself.
Stop talking to yourself. What are you, out of your fucking mind? No, but hey, I'm having a conversation with myself. I must be insane. Oh, well.
Conversation with yourself.
Stop talking to yourself. What are you, out of your fucking mind? No, I'm back. Yeah, darling. Come over here and sit on my lap. Now we want you to sing the libretto part, please. Oh, two. At the Glee Club. At the Glee Club. Well, at the Glee Club. We all get together and meet, go around and smell each other's feet. And, decide who's going to be the big queen of the Glee Club convention that's having down in Chatsworth, L.A. proper, yeah. We sing songs that go...
So when I said that track was unique, I obviously wasn't kidding. And for anyone out there who's trying to come up with a band name at the moment, I think Barracuda Steak seems like a pretty strong contender.
Right.
Well, before we got you on the line, I mentioned to the listeners that all the work you've done for other artists is too big a topic to cover in one podcast episode, but I do want to talk about your gig with Steely Dan, which is the reason that you're up in Canada at the moment. You played with them last night in Michigan. Tomorrow you're going to be starting a Canadian run. I was at your Phoenix gig last month, which was the third time I'd seen Steely Dan, but the first time I'd seen this current lineup with Keith Carlock, yourself, and our friend John Harrington. You and John are in an interesting situation in that the band leaders play the same instruments you do throughout the show. Walter Becker plays guitar all night, and Donald Fagen spends most of his time at his Rhodes, though he does occasionally walk around and play his melodica. Clearly they have no qualms about acknowledging that you and John are better players than they are, but even so, is it a little strange to be in a situation where your bosses are basically encouraging you to show them up every night?
No, it's not strange at all. It's actually an honor. It's a beautiful songbook. It's just such a wonderful challenge to try to recreate, all those lovely things happening on the records, and then take a little bit further with live versions. And a lot of these songs, there were, multiple tracks of different keyboards and guitars. So it actually makes a lot of sense that there should be more than one keyboard and guitar.
Yeah, Walter Becker takes several solos, and Donald does here and there. Mainly it's about them as writers and about Donald as a singer. And there's a precedent for a lot of guest guitar players on their albums, and keyboards too. I think of Victor Feldman, maybe Greg Fellengains, you see on Steely Dan. But, Michael Amardian and people like that. But it's just, you got a guy sitting at the keyboard going, hey, I'm a good keyboard player. But check out this guy behind me, Jim Beard. He's a real good keyboard player. And you've got Walter Becker saying, I'm a good guitar player. I'm a good bass player. Check out John Harrington over here. He's a real good guitar player. My point is, a lot of people might have too big of an ego to do that, is my point.
Yeah, but I think they came to terms with that, back in the 70s when they were making all those records, especially starting with Royal Scam and realizing that calling in studio players was the way to go for their music.
John has been posting reviews of all your shows, which I'm reading now, but which I made a point of not reading before I saw the show myself because I wanted to be surprised by the set list. And when he was here, I asked him which of their tunes he enjoyed playing the most. He said he liked things like Black Friday and Reelin' in the Years because they had fewer chord changes. Specifically, what are some of your favorite titles that you're performing out of their catalog?
Oh, good Lord, there's so many that are great. Songs like Babylon Sisters and Deacon Blues. They're just so rich and luscious with the harmony. But then I love playing, a rocker like My Old School just because it's fun to, it's fun to play rock and roll piano and just, get into the groove. And then I'm a sucker. I like some of the sweeter, sappier ones, that, like Bad Sneakers. And then simple tunes like Pearl of the Quarter. It's just great, fantastic, great pop writing. There's so many of their songs. I mean, that was a strange thing about the gig. When I got called, they sent me a bunch of music PDFs, and I started going through the music. And every time I'd start playing a song at the piano, I'd say to myself, "Oh yeah, I love this song." And I'd go to the next song, and I'd say to myself, "Oh man, I love this song." And I go to the next, and it was just every time. I mean, there's not many songbooks of bands or composers where there's just so many great ones.
No, they're uniquely talented in that regard because a lot of the music I like, particularly rock or pop, I can just pick out by ear. I don't need sheet music. But I bought a Steely Dan. I actually bought the one years ago that they complained about because everything was in the wrong key. I think somebody transposed the entire Asia album, Home at Last was in G sharp instead of G. And they went and got the books when they were starting to tour again and found out that everything was in the wrong key. But that's since been corrected. And I would get out Deacon Blues or Babylon Sisters and play through it and realize 8 bars in, I go, I could never write this ever because of the choices they made and the way it's harmonized. They just have a quirky uniqueness about it. It's just like, it's a blessing that those guys did their recording and mixed rock and jazz and soul and that whole mashup that they got going because it's so unique. And, from watching the show, that catalog holds up beautifully. I mean, I'd be happy to write, anything off of Asia today or right. 20 years from now, Black Cow. It's sort of timeless in that
It
way.
holds up extremely well. It's timeless music for me.
Well, let's bring it back to your own stuff. In 2013, you released Show of Hands, which is quite a departure in that you're the only musician on the album. It's comprised entirely of solo piano performances. The 20 tracks on the album, 7 of them run under a minute and are identified as haikus. So are these improvisations?
Yes, those were all... I wasn't even going to put those on the CD, and then I was actually consulting with John Harrington, and I played him some of them, and he said, "Oh, those are great. You got to put them on the record." And they're all under a minute. A haiku is a short Japanese poem which uses like imagistic language, I should say. I could have used the word interlude or tone poem for these titles, but I prefer the sound of the word haiku.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're completely spontaneous improvisations. And the first one, clarion, means brilliantly clear or loud and clear. So the opening piece is a sort of a clarion introduction to the CD.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was wondering if you'd thought of a title like Country Haiku and then played accordingly, if you just played something that sounded country and then titled that based on what you heard.
No, usually my titles usually come after the fact.
Yeah. That's why there's 20 tracks. There could have been the normal 11 or 12, but you included this. And it's also nice that they sort of break everything up. It's not like, everything is 5.5 minutes from start to finish. And there's also variety in the sense that some of these things are things you've written, some of them are not. For example, you did a version of Fats Waller's Honeysuckle Rose, which could probably be subtitled Left Hand Workout.
Yeah. A couple of these songs on this CD are a sort of tribute to George Shearing, who was a teacher of mine when I was younger. And I remembered him in a master class. He played Honeysuckle Rose. I didn't have a recording of it. I didn't have music. I was just kind of going by my memory of him playing it. And so I was trying to recreate what I heard him do, years ago.
It's funny you mentioned him because I was going to ask you about him at the end of the discussion of this album. And in fact, I think I still will do that. After we've listened to something from this album, we'll bring him up. I saw the Indiana University recital program from the early 80s that you posted on Facebook, and I noticed that one of the selections from that recital was Old Folks, which also appears 30 years later on this album, so you've been living with that one for a while. Of course, I've only heard the recent version. I wasn't at the show in 82 or 83, but how has your interpretation of it changed with time? Is it essentially the same, or is it completely different now?
Well, I've just, that's just always been one of my favorite songs, and as you noticed from my college days, it's a beautiful song. Basically, with this approach, it's a theme and variation approach in a way, and I just sort of had a lot of the great jazz piano masters in mind as well. A lot of these, when I recorded the album, I had sort of a general kind of plan, but I also left room and time to not know what I was going to do and just let some things come out. Like I didn't know the theme and variations would come out quite like that.
Yeah, that's what jazz piano is about. I mean, I've heard a lot of Dave Brubeck stuff where I know from measure to measure. He's just like, how about this? How about this? So it's fun about his playing. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention To an Acreon in Heaven with its accompanying backstory that predates Francis Scott Key. I'll let you enlighten us as to that historical tale.
Yeah, well, this is the music that is used for the United States national anthem. It originated, however, as a song for the Anacreontic Society, which was an 18th century gentlemen's club of amateur musicians in London, and they used this song as their theme, and this was in the late 1700s. Now, usually when you hear this song, it's it's usually in a sports arena, and it's always done with very much bravado and dramatics, and a lot of times with a sense of overachievement. So my mission with this song was to make it beautiful and to practice restraint.
Yeah, no cannons going off or
right.
people stretching one note into 57 notes. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, it's the classiest and most harmonically sophisticated version of that piece of music I've ever heard. And it's interesting that this British group has this piece of music and then the Yanks over here adopt it as their national anthem.
Right, exactly.
It must have been a little bit odd for them.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of sophistication, I think Face on the Barroom Floor is my personal favorite track on the album just because there's so much interesting stuff going on musically. The first time I listened to everything start to finish, we usually do it when I grab an album, I don't read liner notes or anything. I just put it on, play start to finish, and that particular one came up, and I ran to the it was on the computer, but it was through some Bose speakers, and I was like, I got to make a note of this one. There's just something about that one that grabbed me. But having said that, the one I've decided to play is the old standard My One and Only Love, because I think it's an excellent starting point to give listeners an idea of the sound and style of the album with the added benefit of a melody that they're likely to recognize, and they can, you said theme and variations, they can hear you develop it. I'm also going to play one of those musical haikus that we were talking about. So first we're going to hear a 45-second improv called Duo Haiku, followed by My One and Only Love from the 2013 Jim Beard solo piano album, Show of Hands.